Hey guys, so today we're going to be doing things a little bit different. Normally we just do normal video reviews and things a little bit just normal. Today I'm going to be doing a little bit different where I'm going to be more podcast style, and I actually have a special guest with me today. I have my wife Victoria.
Hi guys.
So she's going to be helping me doing this review for 13 Reasons Why Season 2. Now this is the follow-up to last year's 13 Reasons Why, which was a big popular hit on Netflix, caused a bit of controversy, and nothing really new in Season 2 here either. Just so you guys know, we will be talking about some spoilers to things that happened in this season. So if you have not seen it yet, please feel free to click away or come back after you have finished the season. So let's go ahead and get into this discussion. So season 2 pretty much takes place fairly recently. I think only a couple of months, like 4 months after season 1. So essentially what happened in season 1 is that this girl Hannah decided to take her own life, and she left 13 cassette tapes behind, giving the reasons as to why she decided to do what she did. Now this one, season 2, essentially follows along that same sort of line, where instead of being Hannah's tapes, the voiceovers are more from the perspective of whoever's on trial, because it's the trial of her parents against the school for negligence. So they're essentially going on trial. The characters themselves are witnesses or being tried for either the parents or for the school. And of course, there's plenty of other drama going on behind the scenes. So that's pretty much the story of season 2. Very much in the same vein as season 1, I guess, in trying to keep that narrative element. But it didn't really work for me, just because it didn't have that connection with Hannah, the character who took her life in the first season. It just never really felt as honest as the first season did. What do you think?
I think a lot of what season 2 was trying to do some damage control over what happened on the first season.
Absolutely.
I think because they did this first season where it wasn't only a hit, but it was also incredibly controversial because it caused a lot of outrage in like the community of parents and in high schools all over the country. You had children being copycats of what they saw on screen, and I think Netflix realized that they had to do some sort of damage control. And I think at the beginning of the season, you can kind of see that perspective. I think you can kind of see where they were trying to go. But halfway through, it's like they were like, okay, it's fine. This isn't working for us. Let's go back to being controversial and let's go back to doing more. I think that's where you lost me, where there was some sort of coherence to what they were doing. I mean, with the whole trial, but then turning it into something completely different, deviating from that.
Well, I think a lot of that, where that came from, is because the first season is based off of a book by Jay Asher, and that actually had a source material for it to be based on. Now, season 2 had nothing to be based on. There's no sequel book to 13 Reasons Why, so they had to come at it more from a show's standpoint. They were trying to, I guess, in a way, respect the original material, but they had nothing to go off of. So they really just had to make it a show in season 2, whereas it was based on something that people could relate to or even knew about in season 1. Season 2, we really had no idea what was going to happen next from scene to scene, and I think that it really showed a lot of the times.
I think the biggest mistake with this whole show is the fact that they try to make a second season with it altogether.
Agreed.
I think this was the type of show that should have been a standalone type of thing, where you do one season based off of this book and you move on, especially because let's assume that Netflix standpoint on wanting to make this a reason for a conversation over these topics. Let's assume that's true. Let's assume that they really wanted to just shine a light on these issues. Then why try and make something more, trying to milk it as much as possible? Since it was successful, let's try and milk it. I think they didn't have anything else to go off of, so they just try to make anything up based on the material that they had from the first season. And I think you could tell that they were slacking in that sense. I think they were just trying to milk the opportunity that they saw more than what they said their ultimate idea was, their ultimate goal was. I don't necessarily feel like it was really about shining a light on things. I think it was more about milking this kind of money machine they created.
That's really not a big surprise from Netflix, I guess, lately.
A
lot of their content seems to be flashy, but not really have a whole lot of great stuff behind it in a lot of ways. I mean, there have been great things, but I mean, their shows tend to be a little bit better than their like movies, original content.
I mean, they've grown a lot. I mean, considering where Netflix started to where they're now, I think they've obviously grown in this business, but this business is also kind of vicious. So they have to stay competitive and they create something, because let's remember that Netflix has done tons of projects that haven't been successful. There's tons of movies and shows that are original Netflix shows or movies that are not successful, that people are not talking about. One of the saddest examples for me, because I actually really like the show, was Hemlock Grove, just to give you a simple example. That's a Netflix original. I loved the first season of that show, but people didn't really talk about it much. And then you have that sits in the dark, and they have something like 13 Reasons Why, and they saw that it was this money machine, and I think that was a mistake. I think it was trying to milk it more than it was necessary.
And I think it kind of goes back to them wanting to start a conversation, but at the same time, their approach to it is also from, like you said, a business standpoint, where they're in it to make money, and they have a company that they have to keep afloat. So there's only so much fan service or conversation or things that they're willing to do. And I think that kind of goes to something that happens later in this season, that it kind of reflects exactly that they're trying to be politically correct, but also there's a board of people that are saying this is okay to do, this is not okay to do. So you don't have a conversation if you're being limited by whatever the people who are giving you the money are saying, if that makes any sense.
And don't get me wrong, I am all for pushing the limits in terms of what we do in the arts and in culture. But I also think there's certain lines people shouldn't cross. And I think with this particular example, I think where they were coming from, maybe originally, maybe the creator of the book itself, maybe was shining a light on these things. And I think one of the biggest criticisms that Netflix got on the show was how it was glamorizing suicide. And it was like...
Yeah, and we actually know several people that say they stopped watching the show because they felt like they were glamorizing.
Absolutely. People who never even made it to this end of the season, of the first season, just because they felt like this is insulting to people who are actually victims of suicide, to families who are family members of people who have taken their own lives. And it's difficult because I think that the biggest issue here, more than anything else, is the fact that they ignored a lot of the signs. I mean, I'm kind of citing Vox here. One of the, from my understanding, is that Netflix hired a person, a psychologist, to review the show before it was published. And the guy was like, no, this person's like a suicide specialist in his field.
Those are the people that should have some serious input.
You would think so. They hired him to have a say on, okay, what do you think of the show? Do you think this could be problematic? And he was like, yes, this is problematic. You should not be publishing this. This is insane. And they were basically telling him, this is going on. We're just kind of hiring you to have something to back us up later. But they didn't really care what his opinion was. They had already spent all this money creating the show. Obviously, they were not going to throw it in the trash because of the opinion of a professional. So they just went ahead and published it. And I think we saw a lot of regrettable things afterwards, kind of like the backlash of it. Not just parents being outraged, not just kids being like, what is this? But we have victims that are kind of like linked to being inspired by the shows to commit this act, which is just sad. I mean, you have people who are vulnerable to these things, and then you expose them to this material, which is incredibly graphic. I don't know for you guys that if you've seen the show before, but season 1 has a very graphic scene in which Hannah commits suicide. And
it's not just that one.
But it's specifically about suicide. That one specifically, it's very graphic. And it's, this imagery of how to commit suicide so graphically. It's been linked to people being more inspired to doing these things than if they hadn't seen that, you know? And even up to season 2, there was no point in the show where any adults were like, this is not the way to go, or, you know, it was kind of thrown in towards the end of season 2. Kind of cheaply, if you ask me, and we can discuss that further later.
Yeah, and I definitely want to get into some of the not so comfortable things about season 2 that we've discussed while we were watching it together. But before we talk about that, let's talk about some of the good things and what this show had to offer. One of the best things that I think season 2 had to offer that season 1 also had was Dylan Monet, who plays Clay. I think really that he was the best thing about the show. He really conveys and carries a lot that this show has to offer, whether it be because he is listening to the tapes in the first season, being a part of Hannah's life, being in love with her, or trying to get justice for her essentially in season 2 because of those tapes. And I think that he's a really good actor, and he's like 21 right now, I think. So I really want to see a lot more of the things that he's done. I mean, I've seen other movies of his, like Open House, I think, which is also on Netflix.
Yeah, it is.
Original. He was the best part of that movie for me. I really like a lot of his stuff. He does drama and conveys everything perfectly. I just really hope that he eventually gets out of that teenager role, because he is young. He looks very young. But hopefully he can be that adult role at some point.
I think that's one of the things that kind of goes against him, is that he isn't only young, but he looks really young.
Sure. He's 21 looking like he's 14.
It'll take a while, to be honest, especially because once you get kind of squared into those roles, it's very hard to get out. Like, I think a great example of this is Dan Radcliffe. It took him so long to be able to get out of that, you're Harry Potter, you're this child, the type of mentality. But I have to agree 100%. I think he's the person to carry the show 100%. But I do want to give credit to all of the other members of the cast. I think they really are great, all of them. The passion with which they do this, regardless of what the story really conveys, it really shows. I think it's so upsetting because you really feel like you can sympathize with their emotions when you see them on screen. And I think Dylan's character is supposed to be this hero who's enraged by what's going on, and you can see it, and it's very convincing, if anything. His performance is just really amazing.
Yeah, everybody else does a really good job, but I think that he is easily the standout, not only being the star, but he just is like head and shoulders above everybody else as far as acting. But everybody else, pretty well did their job. There's really I think the acting is probably one of the best things that this show has to offer, because I feel like that these people believe in their character, and they believe in what the power of what they're portraying kind of has. They see that impact, and they're trying to convey that in the best light, even though, like you said, the writing may not necessarily reflect that always, but I feel like that's what they're trying to do.
I mean, and considering what the characters are supposed to represent, they all do really great. And sometimes you'll be angry at certain characters.
And God.
You'll be sad and disappointed, and you expect better from them. But the fact that they were able to portray them so well and so convincingly is what makes you to have that bond with them, where you can say, I expect the better of you, or like, I hate you, I can't stand you. It's because they're doing it well. Otherwise, you wouldn't really care if you couldn't see that. So I think, if anything is worth watching about this show, it's the performances of these people.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Now, I don't really want to wait much longer. I think we have to get into the...
rip the Band-Aid.
Yeah, we have to rip the Band-Aid off. We have to talk about the things that we don't want to talk about, the things that make us uncomfortable. Now, there are plenty of those in Season 2. Season 1, we had a couple. Season 2, we had a couple, but they hurt a lot, I think. But I think that you know immediately when it's going to be bad. When they did it last season, I think on 1 or 2 episodes as well, they put a warning before the episode actually starts. Now, it's usually regarding whatever tough subject matter it may be. one of which was being the sexual assault. And then there was the
explicit
suicide, something along
Yeah.
those lines. But they do warn you that it's going to be happening. Same thing with this season. They had 2 episodes, I believe, that had those warnings, but they were very hard episodes to watch, especially for those warnings. Those warnings needed to be in red letters, not in black and white. They needed to be in red letters.
Honestly, I think that's one of the biggest issues that I have is the fact that you see these warnings, you're like in the back of your head, you're like, oh my God, this is not going to be great. Especially after the experience of season 1, because when we first see that warning, and mind you, I was kind of late watching the first season compared to like you and some of my friends, and they told me, there's going to be some tough stuff coming up later on. And I'm like, okay, it's fine. And then you see the warning, you're like, okay, it's there. But you never expect it to be as bad as it is. And I think this season really did it in terms of like, oh my God, like what did I just see? Like it's crazy.
Yeah, and I think on one of the episodes, the warning wasn't necessary. I think the main warning was, the last episode, right? Mm-hmm. The one that had it before just sort of, I think it was like episode 7.
I can't remember.
Somewhere around there, that had a warning as well. But that one had that warning because it flashed back to something that happened in season 1, which you've already seen before. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't as explicit.
I think that's what made it hardest for me personally, is that because I had seen the warning on that previous episode and then it happened, and then I'm like, in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, I've seen this already. It's rough to watch, but I've been kind of desensitized to it. Not desensitized, but like I've been exposed to it before, so it wasn't too bad. But then I saw the warning again. I'm like, hopefully this won't be as bad either. And then it's really bad. And I feel like
you're talking about the last episode.
Okay. Each season has its one episode that's like the trademark of shock about that specific season. And I gotta say that this season's one was really insane.
I'm gonna, like I said, and this is gonna have plenty of spoilers in it in regards to those shocking moments. The one that I think that we need to talk about there's 2 main ones that are especially in the last episode. The first of which being a very brutal sexual assault that takes place in a bathroom for essentially no reason at all. Like, this scene had 0 reason to be in this series at all.
0 coming in either. You were not expecting it whatsoever.
So essentially Tyler, one of the characters who's essentially been marked as I don't want to call him necessarily a nerd, but he's an outcast of sorts for various reasons.
They've called him perv.
Yeah, they consider him more perv because he's taking pictures of girls without their consent, things like that. But what happens to him in this bathroom is not... And what makes it worse for this scene, I think especially, is that Tyler has been through so much already in the first season with bullying, and then the second season, that this scene, to push him over the edge to go into the other scene that we're going to talk about, was completely unprompted and unnecessary. I mean, granted, I feel like they needed something to make him go over that edge because he goes off to like some camp thing for a little while.
Yeah, because let's kind of talk a little bit about the background. Throughout the season, they've been kind of foreshadowing this possibility that Tyler may be a school shooter. Not
even the season. I mean, like, they started it as of last season. At the very end, he's in his room and he has the locker thing, the foot locker in his room, and like you can see the guns in there. So at the very end of season 1, they kind of even foreshadowed it that early.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, you're always like, oh, like, damn, like, he's got guns, and then like they hammered it so hard in this season.
Yeah.
That from the moment he starts like seeing a handgun, or like, and then he starts shooting with a friend, and then like every single episode, I know what it's building to. It completely foreshadowed it.
It really is kind of.
I don't know if it ruined it necessarily, but like the writing was on the wall.
I feel like it was very stereotypical. I feel like it went into stereotypes, and stereotypes don't necessarily equal truth, because I think a lot of it was like, oh, you have this just shy, nerdy guy who no one talks to, who gets bullied all the time, and then you automatically relate him to guns. and then you foreshadow a possible school shooting, and it just, I think that's what made me more upset about that they linked Tyler to this, was that there's this myth that
And it's created by adults. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
It's not a kid's thing.
I think the issue here is that they want to find a reason as to why school shooters do what they do. And one big myth, and I'm not saying by myth that it doesn't happen, I'm just saying it's not as often as people think, is that this person got bullied and that's a reason why. And let's build sympathy for these people because they're just so upset and then they went ahead and did this. Maybe some, but not all of them. A lot of them who have been portrayed as being bullied have just, it's not true. And the children from the Parkland school shooting have spoken out about how they tried to befriend this guy several times, and he still refused to be friends with them and still went and shot that school in Florida. And it wasn't because he was bullied. He just had serious mental issues. Those are the things you have to address. I think with Tyler, what upset me the most was that he went through this horrible thing that he goes through, because even before Hannah, he was getting bullied. This wasn't new. Like, he was getting bullied all the time. And then he goes to this, like you said, this camp thing that the principal of the school suggests, right?
I believe, yeah.
And he goes to this camp and he comes back with a better attitude. He's like, in the scene that we're talking about in the bathroom, he's trying to not be confrontational. He's trying to actually have a conversation. Obviously, he's talking to a bunch of, in my opinion, animals, because anyone capable of doing something to that degree is not a human being. Yeah. He's trying to have this conversation, and then out of nowhere, they go into not just beating him, but sexually assaulting him. And it was just like...
Yeah. Completely unprompted, completely unnecessary. Just... It was
let's keep in mind that it's not...
That scene, like, I believe for both of us, like, watching that scene... Like, last season was bad. Like, with Hannah's suicide, like, I was devastated, like, watching it. But I felt like it was something that was very impactful also, because I wasn't one in the camp that believed it was promoting at all, or, like, trying to glamorize it or anything like that. But, like, it was really... That was hard to watch. But I kind of made myself watch it because I thought... People do this, and it's sad. So, you know, I felt like it was sort of that awareness thing. This one was none of that. Like, it was extremely hard to watch for all of the reasons opposite of what last season did. And I felt physically sick for hours after we finished watching it. Like, watching it, like, I felt like this... like weight on my chest. Every single joint hurt. Just like to move a little bit felt physically demanding and hard to do.
I just remember sitting there watching this and my heart was just thumping. I was like getting chilled. It was really bad. I was legitimately physically upset. And I remember telling you that there's only another film that's made me feel like that, like physically upset in my personal experience anyway. And it was Passion of the Christ. And I think it's because, for instance, like I was mentioning to you earlier today, when you watch things like Saw, for instance, which is very gory, very physically upsetting, it's more like, you know, it's fake. You know,
and we know that horror movies do all this.
Yeah, and it's exaggerated and it's over the top, so it doesn't look as realistic. It's not in a regular setting. It's like you're in this cabin in the wood. Like, it's different, you know what I mean? But when you see it, for instance, in the context of like in the Passion of the Christ, and even if you're not religious, just thinking about like the person that's involved and like all the stuff they put him through in the film, and it's very graphic. Like every lash, everything is really graphic. It upsets you. It makes your stomach upset just to think of any human being, any person, any being being put through something like that, and then watching Tyler in this situation, especially after seeing him try to have a conversation with this person, beaten and sexually assaulted with a broom. I don't know. It's just really...
No, and like, I feel like that not only was it bad and unnecessary, but like they pushed it further than it even needed to go. Like the amount of, like, you can see it, like, of force that this kid is putting behind the broom.
Yeah.
To when he's done and he pulls it out and you can see that it's bloody. Like, it's bad. Like,
it's really bad. Because I think, I'm not comparing the severity of the sexual assault that, for instance, Hannah goes through.
No, I'm not trying to compare the two. But
I think any situation in which you're physically assaulted, when you're sexually assaulted, when you're being beaten for no reason, it's upsetting and it's unfair and it's not good. But I think in as a viewer, when you see Hannah's assault, it's just her in the jacuzzi with this other guy, but you only see like shoulders up type of thing, and maybe glimpses of like a shoulder here and like a leg here, but it's not as graphic. You know what's going on, and it's just as upsetting.
Well, I think that with even the first season with Hannah's scene in the jacuzzi, like even then, because we had the background of her tapes, I think even during that scene, like she's describing what's happening. Like she was so like upset about it and like scared and things like that, even that like while it was happening, she went limp. And that also made me feel physically sick, just thinking like she was going through that pain and like that was the way she was trying to cope with it. Still a disgusting, horrible act that occurred, but this one was a lot more barbaric and like brutal. Just as you were mentioning, like pure animal almost, that it just makes you physically sick to think that human beings would treat each other this way.
Yeah.
For no reason, unprompted. Yes, Tyler did bad things in his past, but nowhere near the severity of other characters or even deserve what happened to him.
No.
And that's the part that's so upsetting.
I think one of the things that I liked about Tyler this season was that he was kind of coping with what he did.
He was on a redemption course, too.
Absolutely.
He was making friends.
He understood he had made a mistake. And when he went to court, he was the only one that had the guts to sit there and say, we all made a mistake. And I did something that I wasn't supposed to do. When she was anything, she was just nice to me all the time. So he understood he made a mistake and he was trying to make friends and he was trying to get better. And there's always someone that's going to try and push you down again. And I think this was also not something we saw coming. With Hannah, we knew that she had some issues with some boys. And I'm not saying, like I said, it eases it a little bit because you know it's coming. And it doesn't ease it because of the act itself. It eases it because you know it's coming. But when you don't know this is coming and then you see this, it's one of the most upsetting things that I have seen. That and the suicide scene in the tub are two of the most upsetting things that I have seen. And I think that's where we get into how Netflix created the show out of pure shock. I don't think the intentions that they say there are behind the show are real, to be honest with you. Maybe,
I believe you mentioned earlier when you were telling me about that Vox article that the creator of the show, not the creator, the writer or something along those lines, director, had said that he was trying to start a conversation. But I feel like that was above and beyond shock value. Like, that was just pure disgust. Like, on a level. Like, I mean, we've seen so many horror movies where things happen, or I don't know, maybe because he's trying to keep it more grounded in real life, but that was just...
It's because, like I said, I
too
think
much.
In horror movies, you have, like, the light is dim and you're in, like, an abandoned bathroom or in a cabin. This is a real-life setting. This is a high school. These are children. I think that's one of the things that's the most upsetting, because they are not children, but they're portraying children. And you know that in the back of your head while you're watching the show. And that's what makes it even more upsetting, the fact that children are capable of doing something to that extent. And I think if you really want to start a conversation about something, there's no need to go into shock value. You could have just, again, foreshadowed the event. Maybe have Monty go into the bathroom and have an argument with him and then push him. And then
well, I mean,
over.
Even if Monty just beat him up.
Not even if he beats him up.
I mean,
I don't think he even has to beat him up, because the beating scene, it's also crazy realistic when he like pushes his head against the mirror and then against the sink.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
Actually, in that scene, I was thinking, like, I don't know how they did it, like, but I was kind of worried about the actor.
Yeah.
Because he bangs his head so hard off of the sink so many times, you literally see it physically move down a little bit. Not much, quarter of an inch, inch, whatever. But still, to slam somebody's head so hard onto a sink.
Like a sink.
I mean, a mirror you can see, like, you like can break, I don't want to say fairly easily, but I mean, it's obviously a lot different than a porcelain sink in a bathroom.
Yeah.
I mean, those things are meant to take pretty heavy damage. I mean, they're probably not going to be replaced ever.
People sit on sinks. Like, wait, we're talking about a human being's weight on sinks.
It was just so brutal.
I don't know. I feel like, again, in order for you to start a conversation about something, you don't have to necessarily make it graphic. You could have simply foreshadowed that Tyler got into the situation with Monty in the bathroom. He could have gone in there, right? And then Monty comes in there and, like, let's say shoves him, right? And then we cut the scene and then we see Tyler later bleeding or whatever. And then he's, like, telling the story to, I don't know, Clay about what happened to him. Or just maybe talking to himself or whatever it may be. But you don't have to go into the graphic details of it in order for you to have a conversation. And I think what's the most upsetting about it is how the director or writer of the story came out about defending it. I think they keep trying to hold on to the same thing of we're trying to create a conversation. We're trying to open people's minds. They're trying to hold on to that so hard because it's the only thing they have in order to defend themselves. These are real things that happen. We know. Even what happened to Tyler, I don't find it unlikely for it to happen. I am sure these things happen. I do not doubt that people get sexually assaulted with objects or whatever just to bully you or hurt you for the sakes of it. But I think the reasoning behind this was just shock value. It was just trying to create a controversy again. And you can tell by how they were trying to do the damage control. Like I mentioned before, I believe it's in the same episode. This is the episode of the funeral, right?
Everything that happens we're even mostly having a conversation about this entire season takes place in that final episode. Everything else, I don't want to say was filler. I mean, because it was the events unfolding of what was happening, but for the most part, it had no impact.
Right.
For the most part. I mean, like, through the entirety of season 1, almost everything was impactful.
I think that's what they were trying to do. I think they strayed away from what the original idea of the story was. They portray Hannah in one specific way in the books, and that's how Hannah was supposed to be. That's where the book ends. There's no sequel to this book. So however the book ends and however season 1 ends, that's the Hannah that we know, and that's it. But then they took the story to a whole nother level. They took Hannah and took this Hannah that we thought we knew and made her into something completely different. Basically, based on season 2, Hannah slept with all of the guys in her school, made out with all of the guys in her school, was not at all who Clay thought. Now it's making Clay angry. It's just changing the narrative from the original story.
Yeah, and I think they're trying to add more to the background. I mean, I get it. There's two sides to every coin, two sides to every story. But it very much ruined a lot of the things that happened.
And let's assume, and this is, again...
Even by adding some context, like what happened with her and Zach.
That's what I was going to say just now, like, spoiler alert. But they start to...
I think we're way past
that. But there's a part where we learn that Hannah lost her virginity to Zach. And even then, if they would have left it at that, that was shocking altogether. Because if you're invested in the characters, you would have never expected this. But then you're like, oh, wow, oh my God, like we didn't know that. And then it comes down to she actually went out with Zach, went out with, what's the bad guy's name?
Bryce.
She goes out with, I can't remember. They're all bad. She goes out with literally everyone in the show. It's just like she made out with everyone on the show, with every single people on the tapes. And I feel that was just forced. I don't really think that's what Hannah was supposed to be like in the original tapes. And again, I agree with you. There's two sides to every story, but at the same time, it was just like, oh, let's see how much we can shock an audience in 13 episodes. And then again, back to how cheaply they try to do damage control. No, at no point in the show do they mention, okay, suicide shouldn't be the way. They wait until the end of the season to have Hannah's mom talk to Clay about a list that she had made of reasons why not to commit suicide.
Yeah, and I feel like that was sort of their, I don't even want to call it an apology, but
they were trying to
fix what happened in Damage Control from season 1 with 13 Reasons Why, and then they even go so far as to being like, it was 11 reasons why not. And she's like, oh, she fell too short.
Yeah.
I think that they fell too short in trying to figure out a way to get a cohesive story that actually we could care about.
I think what happened is that, and then the mom's like, you know that there's always more reasons why not than reasons why. And it's like, yeah, but where have you been? Like, you know what I mean? It's
we
like,
could have used that list a long time ago.
And this moment lasts 2 or 3 minutes.
Not even that. I think it's maybe a minute.
Yeah, probably.
And then she's like, oh, I'm going to New York. Bye.
Bye. And it's like, let's not talk about this anymore. Let's go back to Tyler getting raped. And it's just like, they didn't care about really doing damage control. It's like the whole point of the conversation, you're telling children to speak
They said
up.
it because it's in there. It's like anything with like a legal document or don't ride this ride because of this reason. They don't want to get in trouble.
I think it's
as long
so
as it's
hypocritical because they go and tell these children, according to them, the point of the show is to tell children to speak up, to tell their parents or their counselors or whatever about what's going on to them. But the whole show is these children telling adults what's happening and none of them listening to them. And it's just like cheap because yes, there are those cases. And I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, every parent and every counselor and every teacher has always listened to what a child is saying, what a child's going through. But there are children who have spoken up and gotten results. There are counselors out there who actually care. There are parents and teachers out there who've actually kept an eye. And I can assure you, if no one really cared, we would have a lot more incidents of this than we see in our day-to-day lives. So I think it was more like they should have had some sort of result. But the whole season, the case fails, the social or like justice system fails them, adults fails them. It's like, no, don't worry, you can get raped, no one's gonna care. You can have all these things, nothing's gonna happen. And yeah,
3
we have
months probation for the bad guy. Like,
and these things happen, and don't get me wrong. I mean,
no, and I think that was probably, and it's gonna sound probably wrong the way it's gonna come out, but I feel like that's probably one of the most realistic things that this season had to offer.
Absolutely.
Is that whatever power that Bryce and his family have and all whatever money and all that stuff, you can essentially get away with it.
That's real life.
And that's the sad part of life.
And I think one of the biggest holes in our social, and I know we're kind of deviating here, but of our justice system is that, oh, because you're a first-time offender, we're not going to take you into consideration for like a heavier. I think this is something we need to start looking at depending on what the crime is. You raped that person, you don't get to go on probation. It's not like you had a pound of weed. Oh, we found you with a pound of weed. That's a lot of weed for just one person, but probation. No. This person raped another person, and we know it wasn't just her. There were several victims. So it's like, these things happen. People do get off.
I mean, that stays with them. And then, like, it's just so frustrating at times.
And again, I know these things happen, and I know there's holes in our in our justice system. But it's also like, there are other people who actually care, and there are people who will listen to you. It's just like, they're basically teaching people, oh, just go ahead and give up because it's so flawed, no one's going to care, no one's going to listen to you, so don't bother. That's a big flaw because if you're teaching people supposedly to have a conversation, to talk more about it, you're not going about it the right way. I think you're just causing more damage than anything else. And the way that they went about that study that I told you about, how Netflix did a study before they did season 2 about how people received it and how it's actually beneficial for people, it was kind of biased. I mean, it was 5,000 people in 3 different regions of the world. So not just in America, where we know this is a big epidemic. And you're just going to talk about how, like, oh, it did well because people are not having conversation. But how about we talk about all those people who have been affected by seeing imagery of suicide on the internet or in TV shows? Even if it's a fictional character, you see a human being. It's not a cartoon. It's a human being sitting in a tub cutting their wrist open. It's graphic to watch. And when you're that vulnerable, that doesn't help. Mm-hmm. It actually just makes it easier for you to go through with it. So it's just like you're causing more damage than you're doing anything else. So you're triggering people by doing these things. And it's just like, it makes you just look bad. And the sad part is that most people are not going to be able to make that separation between, oh, these are great performers and this is a shitty show. It's like, oh, these people did really well, but no one's gonna care because you're in a show that caused way too many issues. So I hope that people are still able to realize that the people who still participated in the show are really good and that they deserve to.
Yeah, and they definitely care about the show and they want to make sure that that conversation is out there. Now, if we're having the right conversation, I think that that's an issue as well.
And I think back to how the season actually ends, how we were talking about foreshadowing that Tyler is going to be...
Yeah, and that's the next thing that we definitely want to make sure we talk about is Tyler's whole, I guess, taking it upon himself, I guess is the best way to say it. Just essentially being fed up with the bullying that he's experienced, all the wrongs that have been going on with him, and deciding to take his arsenal of guns that he's been keeping in his little footlocker at his house, which I think originally was in his room in the first season and it was partially in his room for the first season, then got moved down to this weird broken hole in the basement. I'm not entirely sure how that happened or when that happened. But essentially that's where he keeps his stash of guns and ammunition. Decides to pack up the car, head over to the school during the spring fling, and he's going to go in there and just unleash his rage, I guess is the best way to put it. But I feel like the way that the season ended, what had happened, yes, it's another tragedy, and I don't know if it's because I don't want to necessarily say that they didn't fully go through with it because of recent events, because it has been such a large epidemic that's been occurring more and more frequently.
I feel like they've low-key tried to create like an American Horror Story where like, oh, first season suicide, second season sexual assault, third season school shootings. It's like, this isn't funny. Like, they're trying to set it up to make it seem like if we want to, we'll make a third season. And it's like, we don't want a third season. Go away with your show, seriously. No, because I feel like what they did was like foreshadow this whole thing and then leave it like an open-ended question. It's like, oh, will we carry on with this information? And I think even the way that they like prevented it, because by the way, spoiler alert, he doesn't go shooting people because Clay comes in and saves the day. And that scene just pissed me off.
Well, just being made aware of it ahead of time was, I think, a plot device for them to start setting up what could happen. Now, one of the girls that the sister of his friend that what was his name again? Tyler. Sorry,
I thought you were talking about the friend.
I don't remember the friend's name.
I don't know.
So the punk kid. So he made a friend during the season, and then ended up he had a sister. They all were hanging out. The sister and him sort of had a thing, which only ended in bad way more for Tyler, and he tried to reconcile for it. But he sends her a text message at some point that we don't know what it says, but she takes it, shows her brother, and then they start sharing it around, informing or implying for whatever reason that Tyler's coming to shoot up the school.
Yeah.
Now, how this information is informed, I have no idea. Does he text her a picture of the trunk of guns that he has? Does he text her, hey, get out of the school, I'm going to shoot it up? Yeah. Like, what context is there?
We never get to see it. And I think that's one of the oh, we might come back type of thing. That we never got to see the text of what he could have said. And I think they kind of...
And I think that only sets up even worse for season 3, if there is one, is that based on this season, this was Bryce's first offense for this, because Tyler sent a text message to tell people to leave, he was warning them, so maybe he'll... Like, what does that really say?
Well, Tony gets him out of this scene, so... True. I don't know exactly what they're going to be able to do, because if they try to cover for him, the police can't come after them, because if the girl deletes the text, and then they say, oh, no, he never sent a text, I'm sorry, we were confused, whatever.
Well, I'm sure they can pull those text records. They can protect they had a whole file. Clay's mom had Clay's mom's attorney company, whatever, firm, had a whole box of text message.
No, I know, but what I'm
files,
saying is
I
like
mean-
maybe they won't go into it because nothing happened. And
That's
I think
true.
it's like, oh, okay, how did you set up a third season if you wanted to do it just on shock value if the kid didn't actually shoot up the school? It's like, okay, where are you gonna go next? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think what pissed me off about the scene is that, first of all, the way that they made it seem, I think it's dangerous what they did.
It's extremely dangerous.
Where they had Clay come out and just confront the shooter and just be like, don't do this, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't want you to die because you're not going to come out alive out of this. Like, we're friends. And it's like, oh, friendship can cure it all. And let's be honest, in a situation like that, where a person is driven to the point where they no longer care and they're willing to drive up to a place to shoot people up, he's not going to stop because of you. He would have shot that kid down, being this a real life situation.
And then
it's like now you're telling children, oh, go ahead and confront the shooters and be like, no, don't do this. There's more for you. Don't. This is dangerous. Like, I feel like we need to start talking about.
And then I feel like that would have only, I mean, granted, this is all just speculation. If he had gone through with the shooting and Clay was unable to stop him and he did decide to shoot him, I feel like that would have, in a way, just made another headline of, one of the friends tried to stop him and he was trying to protect everyone, but he was the first to die. I saw that with the most recent one.
Mm-hmm. The one in Texas.
The one in Texas, in Santa Fe. Mm-hmm. There was literally an article that said, I think one of the students was trying to help other students, but he was like one of the first to die. Mm-hmm. It was just another headline. And it's extremely sad that a life became a headline like that for trying to do something good. And I feel like that's something that could have happened for season 3. I mean, obviously it didn't, and there's 1,000 other things that could happen.
I just think it's dangerous that you're playing with, like, go be a hero. Go out there and talk to him. It's like, how are we going to... Because Clay, before he goes outside and meets with, or sees Tyler with the guns, he goes, are we just going to let him,
They're trying to figure out a way to stop him, essentially.
Yeah, but they're basically just saying, like, oh, are we just going to turn our back on him? Because they knew they could have left and just let everybody else get shut up. But they were like, oh, let's not turn our backs on them. And I think call the police. If you know it's coming, close the doors. Any type of entrance to the gym where you were located or whatever. But don't go out there.
He kind of has that action plan.
Yeah, but don't go out there and confront him, because we know that this would have been a real life situation. Clay wouldn't be alive. Because no one in that situation is going to say, oh, I'm already here. I have AK-47 in my hands. I'm just going to stand here and listen to you. And then, no, that's not how it works.
And especially with the way earlier in the season, he kind of conveys talking about guns and like feeling power. So if there's any point for him to feel at most as powerful and not care about anything, it's right then. When he's got guns on his hips. That was the same
night he got raped. It was later that night that he went and did what he did.
Yeah, I think so.
So it was just like, he is filled with anger. If he wanted to have done this based off of that, he would have. I think just the way, it was just like, let's just put all the high school situations and tragedies we can think of into one season. It was just sad.
And on the same group,
cheap.
I mean, like, they just try and like connect the events. Like, I'm not trying to say like people who go through tragedies don't have other tragedies later in their life, or don't experience multiple tragedies, or whatever it may be. But the fact that this same group that was associated with the last tragedy is associated with this tragedy, and like...
And I think it's also, like, one of the things that I think it's kind of just weird about the show is how, like, they try to...
TV writing,
they try to make you feel sympathy for the bullies in the story. It's like, we have all these people who bullied Hannah, and then now we're giving them back stories so that you feel sympathy for them. They really did that,
especially with Justin. And, I mean, Justin, we knew how to...
It pissed me off that throughout the whole thing, people are being crazy supportive about Justin instead of just getting him the help that he needs and just moving on with their lives. Because Justin allowed Jessica to get raped by Bryce. So let's just talk about that for a second.
And then they tried to make Bryce also a victim in some sense with like his parents not being around. And
yeah, it's like you're trying to create sympathy for the bullies. And I'm not saying let's just crucify all the bullies because they're just bullies and whatever and you shouldn't care. No, I'm sure there are people too, and there's ways that we can deal with what they're going through so that they don't make other people's lives miserable. But it's also like, don't make me feel sympathy for a person. It's like when they went back with that whole story that Hannah had been a bully herself in another story, but like, let's think about how she was just trying to fit in. It's just like, what are you doing? Like, what do you want me to feel like? Do you want me to feel sympathy for this person? Do you want me to not feel sympathy? It's just like, I don't know what they were trying to do. They made
I feel like what they were trying to do in their making of a mess was trying to convey, again, going back to the how, like, you conceive yourself, how other people conceive you, multiple stories, trying to gather the whole story, things like that. And I feel like that's what they were trying to do, but like you said, they just ended up making a big mess of the whole thing. I just think
it's an issue because, I mean, I'm a psychologist, and when I went to school and I studied all these things, the most vulnerable time of your life is that development time. When you're a child, you're mostly, we're talking about 99% of your time under the care of your parents. And even when you go to school, it's kind of different because children play and develop differently than adolescents. Adolescents are in a time where they're discovering their independence, but also still under mom and dad's care, but now trying to create social groups and just make that transition to an adult. It's a very vulnerable time, and it's a time where instead of going through these things, I mean, you will still always have moments in your life and people that will shape you. And sometimes we need negative things to happen to us in order to make us who we are. There's no way you can completely protect yourself from anything negative ever happening to you. I don't think you should ever get to the degree that it gets in this show. But you always have people that you disagree with, or people that, you know, might not understand who you are or what you're about. But it's just like you're making a show where there's children, so other children are, I don't know, inspired to watch the show, and then it's just not, it's not good.
I think with Netflix, it's especially, I hate for the word to be dangerous, but that's the word that's coming to mind, is that Netflix has become very quickly a necessity for people. Mm-hmm. Like, people watch it on airplanes, people watch it at night relaxing in bed. It's only like, what, 13, like 12, I was like 10 or something like that, right? But now it's like $13 and you can have it on whatever device. You can just log into your account and you can continue watching it. And so, I mean, people share accounts, or like their families have an account and like the kids have access to it, whatever, just by logging in.
And that's the thing. The thing is that, let's say when you have a TV show that it's on TV, I mean, yeah, you have the internet where you can pull up like copies or whatever of the actual TV show when it aired, but it's harder for parents to control what their children are being exposed to with Netflix, because they can see it in school with their friends. And a lot of people, they were talking about in some of the articles that I read about the show, is that children weren't even looking at the background of the show. They were just going to the graphic scenes for shock value, showing it to one another.
That's because that's what people are talking about.
And then it's like, now you're watching this scene without zero context. And it's just creating issues more than anything else. And I think, obviously, there's only so much accountability they can have as show creators, because they can't control who watches it. But I think they can control what they put in when they keep in mind who their audience is. And to me, it was just like, we have this thing that went well in the first season. Yeah, we have a little bit of issues with controversy, but it's fine. We'll deal with them. And then they milk them as much as possible with season 2. And they're trying to, I'm sure, milk it with, if they're trying to create a season 3.
I mean, I think season 3 is most likely going to be inevitable. I know there's a lot of, I think, skepticism that will even happen based on the bathroom scene.
People were asking on Twitter and on Facebook and on social media to have the show canceled. They wrote letters to Netflix. They said, we gave you a chance. We saw the first one. You told us you understood where we were coming from. But they wanted to hide behind the warnings. They wanted to hide behind at the end of the show, after you've been shocked to death, now we're telling you, if you need help, go into da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah, that like, needs to be at the beginning.
Help. Like, it's too late now. Like, I'm scarred for life. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I feel like people gave Netflix a chance to do legitimate damage control, and instead they tried at the beginning, and they're like, nah, this is not going to make us money. So here, shock. And it was just like,
and I think that if they do end up getting a season 3, that they were going to get a season 3 most likely no matter what. Mm-hmm. Because if Tyler decided to go through with it and shoot up the school for whatever reason. Then we have another tragedy that the school experienced. If Tyler does not, for whatever reason, end up shooting himself in this matter, we're probably going to have him on trial or whatever cases of him being in jail or whatever. Who knows what's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
So it could have gone that way easily. But by going the direction of, okay, Tony picks up Tyler, speeds off with him, and then Clay's standing outside with an assault rifle. This is not going to end well no matter what. Like, they're setting up that season 3 no matter what direction they're going for. So if they do get canceled, I'm not going to say no harm, no foul, but like the damage has been caused. But
super open-ended. Kind of like, if we want to, we still can come back, you know?
Yeah. But I feel like that no matter what, season 3 is going to be kind of inevitable, just based on views alone. I don't think it's necessarily about how it was received. It's going to be more of a matter of this many people watch this, so let's do it again. Like, let's do more. Let's do another season. And I think that's a lot of what shows, movies, even creating sequels. Is it popular? Did it make enough money? Okay, then we'll do another one.
And I think the fact that you had 2, at least confirmed victims linked to having seen 13 Reasons Why Season 1 and committing suicide as a copycat of what happened to Hannah, and you still went and did a second season, shows how little you actually care. Because if you would have seen and realized the impact that this has on people who are actually vulnerable, then you would have been like, okay, I'm creating or I'm encouraging the problem that I was trying to create a conversation for. Let's just leave it here. We did what we did. The people who were inspired. The people who were affected were sorry. But don't go and then make something even worse than what you did. It's a slap to the face, if you ask me.
Yeah.
It's just sad.
Yeah, I feel like that the show definitely jumped the shark a little bit here, in terms of keeping it cohesive story and just doing things for shock value. Kind of doesn't make me want to watch season 3. I know if it was now available on Netflix, I probably would just start going for it. But, you know, thinking about it at this exact moment, most likely I just don't want to watch it.
To be honest, I had a hard time sleeping after we watched that. It was just so upsetting in so many different ways. And I am all for talking about these things. And I am all for dealing with these issues that we've had and we should have been dealing with for a very long time. But I'm not up to talking about these things the wrong way, bringing these things up. And you protecting yourself with, we care, we want to create a conversation just for you to make money. I'm not up for that. I don't think it's okay for people to try and monetize real issues, real social issues that we have and that teenagers are experiencing every single day. I think there's better ways to go about it, and I don't think this was the right way. If there's a season 3, I mean, that only shows us that this is true. It just confirms our suspicion that it's just a money machine, and that's what they're trying to do. I mean, if I could suggest anybody to watch the show, watch it to get your own opinions about it. But if you really don't want to
have these conversations, but really, that's the only reason.
People are not talking about the issues. People are talking about the
13 reasons why. There's only one reason why.
Yeah,
just to have the conversation about how messed up it is.
Honestly, I would, if it were up to me, I would tell people not to watch it. It's upsetting. It's triggering. It's not something I would suggest anybody sees. And I really do hope that no one ever goes or experiences this, ever. I know
for whatever reason.
For any reason. I hope that we can do more as a society to prevent these things from happening. But I don't think this is the right way to go about it.
Yeah, I definitely.
As a professional, I think it's something that worries me to see for people to think that this is the way.
Yeah. So I think it's time that we start wrapping it up here a little bit. All in all, I really don't think that season 2 was that great. It had a lot of things that just did not work for me whatsoever. It was extremely frustrating. Nowhere near as impactful as I think they intended it to be, although it got thrown around more than enough, which is really unfortunate. But the grade that I would personally give 13 Reasons Why Season 2, honestly, I'm very much on the fence, leaning towards a D+, C- region. But because I try and see the good that's coming from it, I'd probably put a C- on it for myself. What grade, if you were to give a grade to this season alone, not necessarily season 1 and 2, season 1 and 2 as a whole, but just season 2, what would the grade you would give it?
I would say I would give it about a C. Like you said, mostly because, or C-, like you said, mostly because I want to give credit where it's due, which is to the actors. I think the acting itself of the show was really well done. Like, people actually invested their time in these characters, and you could see it, and you couldn't make it. You didn't have Dylan, you had Clay, and it was just like you could see that separation of characters, and I think that's something I want to give them credit for. But honestly, that grade is just based on acting and acting alone.
Well, really, at the same time, I don't want to base my grade of 13, probably ballpark around 13 and a half hours of a season based on 4 minutes total max of controversial scenes. I got to give them credit. They created a show. A lot of hard work, acting, and behind the scenes, I'm sure, went into creating the show. So trying to give that a little bit more positivity to it, probably put that C+, C- grade on it myself. But definitely not anywhere near I thought as great as season 1 was, which is really unfortunate. But really, I think pretty much wraps it up. It's really all we have for this conversation on 13 Reasons Why Season 2. I mean, if you have been brave enough to watch it already, please feel free to leave a comment down below. If you have not yet seen it, viewer discretion is advised, I guess. I don't really know how to best put that. But any final thoughts before we go?
No, just thank you for having me. This is the topic that I feel very powerful about, so
yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me.
Absolutely.
It was a great conversation that we had that I think they wanted us to have, but not exactly the conversation they wanted.
He was hoping
I don't know. Yeah, other than that, thank you guys so much for watching, or I guess in this case, listening. I really do appreciate it. Like I said, be sure to let me know your thoughts about this season in the comment section down below, as well as let me know how you guys like the format of this video. If you think that like this sort of conversation podcast style, whatever you want to call it, type of video is something that you guys like. If it's something that go back to video, I don't want to listen to it, or whatever it may be, be sure to let me know your guys' thoughts on that. But other than that, thank you guys so much for watching / listening, and I hope to see you in the next one.